The promise we kept. I promised her once on our wedding night that I would never let her go. I meant it the way people mean the weather when they speak of it to fill a silence, with the softest faith that the phrase will be enough. I kept that promise the way people keep things hidden inside the walls, folded into places where light does not reach. We were married in a church that smelled of old wood and orange blossoms. She had a laugh that bent the room toward her, and a list of small disappointments that she kept like receipts. She collected grievances with the care of a hobby. I offered apologies that were thin and easy to fold. Those papers piled as if weightless, and then one winter night they became heavier than either of us noticed. There were small moments that could have been warnings. A glass smashed and was swept away before anyone asked questions. Phone calls that ended when I crossed the doorway. The way she catalogued our days, with notes that disappeared into a box no one else knew about. We told ourselves stories to make sense of the quiet. We told the neighbors we were fine. We told ourselves that the ledger of our house had entries that were solvable. Planning slips into the spaces where people stop looking. On paper, the solution looked like a kindness given in the winter to a life that had grown hard. Paper does not carry the sound a heart makes when it bargains with itself. After the house took its usual breath, the world behaved as if nothing had happened. The television hummed at its usual volume. The neighbor mowed the lawn on schedule. People delivered casseroles and phrases like bandage fabric. They spoke sterile words and filled the counters with sympathy. They told me I had been brave, but houses keep receipts the way people do not. They remember the small things, even if no one else does. Late at night, there were noises that learned to speak in the precise language of absence. A careful footfall that passed over old floorboards like a step rehearsed. The vents carried a voice that did not accuse and did not plead. It only read back to me the same soft words I had used on myself. Once, while the house was asleep, in a way I can now name as denial, a whisper came through the vents, as plain as if the house had a tongue. "You promised," it said. There was no heat to the voice. There was only the certainty of a ledger kept and a wound catalogued. It did not ask for forgiveness. It did not seek pity. The days that followed were a study in ordinary things that felt too heavy. People came with casseroles and phrases stitched for comfort. They never went into the attic. They asked polite questions and then left, as if the quiet could be packaged and discarded. At night, the house learned my regrets. It replayed the rhythm of her footsteps and altered them just enough to make me listen. The radiator sighed in a cadence that sounded like counting. Once a photograph slid from the mantel, as if some small wind had decided to take a story out for a walk. I tried to repay my debt with small attentions. I rearranged flowers until the arrangements looked like apologies. I left notes in drawers and whispered things into pillows. The house collected those offerings like a cat with a habit. It had patience. It had taste. If I ignored a sound, it would increase until ignoring was no longer possible. There are experts who will tell you houses do not keep lists. They will insist memory lives only in people. I do not know which is truer. I only know what I hear when the world goes quiet. A voice that is not human reads back my old phrases. It does not accuse. It simply reminds me of my promise and does not accept explanation. So, if you must vow something on a day full of light, make sure your promise is not the kind that can be folded away. Keep your words where people can see them, and do not let them slip into the dark seams of a house. If the walls ever read your life back to you at 3 a.m, do not answer. Sit very still and try to remember which parts of you are yours to hold. Sometimes I imagine undoing everything, returning the years, and trading the word brave for something quieter that might fit. But imagination is a cheap currency in a house that keeps receipts. It will take your imaginings and file them under later, and then call them back by name. I tell you this, not to ask forgiveness, but to warn. Walls listen. They do not always speak in anger. Sometimes they simply make a neat list and wait for someone to sign it. If you ever hear your own voice in the vents, read back like a practice script, close the curtains, close the doors, and for once, let silence be the heavy thing you keep. Next story.
The voice behind the walls. The first time the house spoke plainly, I thought I was dreaming. The second time, I could not sleep, for the way my bones felt like someone had taken a ledger to them. My daughter left in the rain one Saturday. She texted that she was at a friend's, and then the messages stopped. The police called it a runaway and filed the forms with the practiced patience of people who do this for a living. Neighbors offered platitudes and casseroles and then retreated when the subject began to feel too long for small talk. I moved through the hours like a man whose shadow had been misplaced. The house changed the way it sounded after she left. The pipes learned new phrases. The radiator composed a low tune at 3 a.m. At first, the noises were the kinds of things you forgive when you're too tired to worry. Then they learned the rhythm of my grief and began to answer the things I did not say out loud. If I pressed my ear to the plaster in the hallway, I could hear fragments. "Not yet," the house said. "We are not finished." "She sleeps," it added, and the words felt like direction rather than accusation. They were not human sounds. I tore a strip of wallpaper back once because the house made it feel inevitable. Behind the paper was a collage of photographs and ticket stubs and a school drawing of our home. There were faces in those photos I did not know. When the police came, they took the photos and wrote the notes and left me with the feeling that the real work had been done. The house kept its part quieter. The whispers circled like a cat waiting for permission to jump on a lap. The closet that once held extra blankets offered up a coat pocket where a crumpled note lay like a child's secret. I unfolded it and saw in her handwriting the sentence I did not want to find. "I am with the voices," it read. The ink was not angry. The paper was folded with the casual firmness of someone certain of a place. After that, the house became a tutor in memory. It rehearsed the lullabies I had sung poorly and corrected them in softer keys. It would tap in the exact cadence of a bowl settling in the sink so that the sound could be mistaken for ordinary life. When I tried to ignore it, the noises would fill the night more loudly until ignoring was impossible. I thought leaving the house would be salvation. I tried to sell it and pack my life into boxes. But houses keep the people who live in them. They retain the scent and the broken promises and make them into furniture. I could not move far because every place I went seemed to have the same wallpaper in another life. People said I was haunted with grief. But grief is not always what you expect. Sometimes it comes in small domestic requests. The house wants repetition. If you provide the ritual, it will be kind. If you do not, the house will rearrange the world until you do. There are nights I stand and count the spaces between sounds. The house breathes with me. When I whisper my daughter's name into the plaster, the walls sometimes answer with a small sound like a bell set on a table. I keep a small offering on the windowsill now, a spoon she favored, a scrap of a joke she once told. The house seems to accept repetition. The house asks me to remember better, and I learn by rote. I still do not know where she is. I only know that houses will make your private things into stories if you give them room. Keep your secrets wrapped in ordinary packages, and do not let them become the house's favorite page. If the walls begin to tell you another life, decide whether you will listen or close the door and walk away. Next story, the call that changed everything. The phone rang at midnight with a ringtone I had not used in years, and the sound felt like a key dropped into a deep, dark well. The caller ID showed nothing. The voice that answered was shaped like my Mother S sentences, but thinner, as if memory had been put through a sieve. "Do not go upstairs," it said. The words were both warning and proof of a knowledge I had not yet earned the right to hold. You can be reasonable and blame a prank or fatigue. I tried, but the calls came on a schedule like a clock, checking its own gears. Midnight, 3:03, 4:04. They were punctual in a way that felt cruel and precise. My attic had always been a place for forgotten things. Boxes of old clothes, reels of tapes with songs I could not name, a trunk full of postcards. The attic door stuck in humid weather, and we rarely climbed the ladder. The calls insisted I not go, and of course, that was the very moment I climbed. In the dark, the attic smelled like paper and dust and the soft decay of old time. There was a ledger tucked under a moth-eaten blanket, thin and bound in leather. Inside it were names and dates and single-lined instructions. For neighbors, a short note. For service people, a curt request. Beside my Mother S name, a date was written that had not yet arrived, and the instruction read, "She will call herself in the dark." The book felt like a thing that knew how to wait. I held it against my chest, and the pages trembled like someone clearing a throat. There was a cool assurance to the handwriting that made my scalp prickle. The house is a keeper of lists, it seems to have told me in that small, quiet way old places do when their bones are exposed. When I tested the number listed beside my own name, the call that answered sounded like my own voice, but older, worn through with certainty. "You should have listened," it said, and I heard in that tone both regret and instruction. The calls turned from warnings into invitations. Bring them, it said. Bring them all. I thought I could be clever. I thought I could burn the ledger, or throw it in a river, or lock it away in a bank-safe deposit box. The ledger has ways to reappear. The house keeps what you put into it, and then it opens accounts. Envelopes began to appear in the crevices of floorboards, each with a number and a thin, polite invitation. Names were suggested, and not all of them belonged to people I knew. At night, the house rehearsed. The pipes recited addresses. The floorboards rhythmically tapped out a list. My phone rang like a bell at the exact minute specified, and the voice at the other end spoke my own name, as if checking to see if the person on the other side would follow instructions. We think the most dangerous things arrive loud and with fury. In my experience, the slow sort of counting is worse. It can teach you how to arrange your life until what you think is choice turns into habit. Once the ledger has your attention, it does not let go easily. It suggests names the way a gentle person offers tea, friendly and impossible to refuse. I stopped answering the phone for a time, and that seemed to please it not at all. The house tightened its sounds, filled the night with small implements of sound that began to map out routes through rooms. Then one evening, a call came that was not a warning. My Mother S voice was softer, and the line hummed like someone setting a table. There is a politeness to the Ledger S appetite. It is not cruel in the vivid cinematic way people expect. It asks rather than demands. That is the way persuasion feels most dangerous. If your house calls you with your own voice and suggests you bring people into a dim room, do not be clever. I did not move the book to a bank. I did not burn it in a backyard fire. I placed it back in the attic where it seemed to settle like a patient animal. The calls continued because lists often need company to feel complete. Each ring was a question. Each instruction, a small step the house thought would restore balance. Sometimes when I hear that late night ring, I imagine the house as an old librarian who wants an attentive ear. It is a comforting picture until you remember rare books are locked away. If a book in your life starts prompting midnight calls with a voice you recognize, do not be flattered. Do not be curious enough to make choices for the ledger. Walk away and let someone else deal with the keeping. Next story.
Why is the room learning me? Hotels are boxes of borrowed lives kept tidy under fluorescent lights. Each room is an anonymous diary. Room 13 was a diary that did not want to be anonymous. At first, the mirror was simply odd. It remembered my angles and small habits, as if it had been keeping a list. I hid the explanation behind jet lag and a too long week. Then the reflection smiled a fraction late, and I understood there was someone learning my rhythms. The mirror practiced me. It rehearsed my expressions until it could suggest a small future the way a friend recommends dessert. It showed me myself at the window, opening it and stepping out as if the glass could demonstrate choices for me. At first I took this as a trick of light. Then it became a suggestion. On the second night my reflection lagged and then led. It moved slightly ahead of me, and I felt the sickening awareness that I was being taught how to finish sentences. The image in the glass was polite and patient. It was learning to be more convincing than I was. I broke the mirror because I did not want my reflection to become practiced. The sound of glass was a geometry that made my ears ring. Under the shards, the hole showed not the parking lot, but the inside of a house I recognized in a way that hurt. A woman sat in that reflected house and smiled like someone reading my application. I wrapped the shards in towels and left before dawn. The clerk filed a report with a bored touch and offered me an invoice that felt like closure. Weeks later, a security clip appeared online, showing a man leaving room 13 at 3 in the morning carrying a bundle. The clip had a small frame skip, and in that moment the reflection blinked for itself. After that, I kept the shards. They hummed under my bed with a static that sounded like a memory being tuned. When I held a piece to the light, it warmed under my palm and showed me a life I had not lived. A life where I had not broken the glass and where my reflection finished the sentence at the window. It was not an offer that wore banners or shouted. It was a patient suggestion, the sort that nestles into thought and rearranges decisions. Mirrors, I learned, are good conversationalists and poor gatekeepers. They will make you feel seen in a way that persuades you to make a different choice tomorrow. They give you the vision of a life that is tidy, and then they wait for you to walk toward it. That is how they work. I returned once with the kind of curiosity that pretends not to be afraid. The clerk had the same small smile and gave me the new key with a manner that suggested neutrality. The replacement mirror behaved as mirrors do until after midnight. When the reflection did a thing I did not. It tilted its head as if listening to a private song. I learned then that mirrors are not crude traps. They are patient tutors. Yet the shards under the bed began to alter my nights. They showed alternatives like polite rehearsals. They suggested kinder lines and smoother exits, and then waited to see if I would choose them. A friend stayed on a dare and returned changed. He would not tell me what the mirror had offered. He packed and left town the next week. Sometimes people choose absence rather than explanation. Now when I pass room 13, I feel a small pressure as if the room keeps a ledger. I do not take the key. I do not ask for more. Mirrors remember the lines you give them, and they will hand them back, pressed and ready. If you ever stand before a glass that smiles at you, with your own face, polished to an easier version, choose the messy answer. Choose mistakes if they are yours. Let your life be raw and unpracticed rather than neatly rehearsed behind silvered glass. Keep your hands on your own face. Lock the mirror in a closet if you must. Some rooms will write you down, like an appointment, and then wait politely for you to arrive. Do not be on their list. Turn away when the glass practices your life, and do not come back for the rehearsal. Like and subscribe for more stories.